right, we are on day 24. This is Matthew Struck from Treadstone Risk Management, day 24 of 30. So today we're talking about social media in the workplace. And the first thing I'm going to do is point you over to another resource that's available after you're done with this. We actually just posted a episode of a podcast that I contribute to. It's called the Call Your Broker podcast. Episode 5 was specific to social media in the workplace, and as a guest we had a attorney by the name of Kelly Adler from Cape Hart Scatcherd. She was a great guest. We really kind of delved pretty deep into social media policies and some of the best practices, as well as some of the horror stories that can result from either a lack of those policies or improper application of them. So you can actually find it by either going to the Treadstone homepage, that's www.treadstonerisk.com, and then if you pull down the About tab, there should be one for Call Your Broker that'll direct you right to the YouTube feed. The other way to do it is just go to YouTube and search Call Your Broker. So that being said, I'm going to start off this talk by referencing a research report that was done by the Pew Study Group, and that was done back in 2016. And they asked a bunch of workers about their social media work at work, their social media use at work, and kind of what policies were in place and how they used it and whatnot. And so there was some reassuring information, such as about half of them, 51%, said that their employer had some form of social media policy in place. What was alarming about that, though, was 45% said that their employer had no social media policy at all. Nothing in writing, nothing documented. And then to delve deeper, of the people that use social media at work, they essentially said that about a third of employers had some kind of policy related to not just using social media at work, but common standards in terms of how the individual should purport themselves or hold themselves in social media, just in general. So not just in terms of their work use, but just in general, so even while they were using it on their free time or in their personal time. And 2/3 didn't even have any policy that referenced that. And so I thought that was interesting. Almost half of workers also said that there was a really positive work purpose for using social media, which has been a growing number over the years. It hasn't been nearly that high until 2016. So despite some of these numbers, employers still have a love-hate relationship with social media, right? Social media is really powerful, but it can also be it could be a positive, but it can also be a big negative. And I think that's why a lot of employers shy away from it. They either shy away from dealing with it, or they shy away from actually using it to its fullest extent because they're worried about the flip side. So everything that I tell you today, you always have to remember that you have to weigh this from a cost benefit perspective or direction, right? So what could you potentially gain from using social media in your business versus what could be the negative impacts. I can tell you personally, you're watching this on social media. We are big believers in social media. We're big believers in digital media, and we think that the level to which people use social media and digital media now is just going to grow and increase in the future. And if you're not leveraging those platforms, you're going to miss out. And so by looking to take advantage of those platforms, you have to put the pieces in place to protect yourself and make sure that you have some policies and procedures that go along with that, that lay out good use as well as bad use, and how you're going to deal with that and how you're going to reinforce it. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of social media? Well, first of which is you get a much wider reach, right? So the one anecdote that I heard someone say was, you could knock on a couple of dozen doors every single day. You could make a couple hundred phone calls every single day, or you could use social media to essentially reach 50,000 plus people per day. The value of that is immense, right? It's all a numbers game, especially if you're in some line of work or an organization that has to do with a sales mentality, or even for a not-for-profit that's looking for donations and you're calling, if you're a part of a political fundraising group, the more people that you can touch on a daily basis, the higher likelihood you are going to be able to get them to buy or donate. So you have to keep that in mind. Social media, when you leverage it correctly, can reach a ton of people for a very, very low cost. There's also an opportunity to humanize your business, right? So when someone just kind of first comes across your business, or if they've seen, if they've gotten a coupon or if they've seen an advertisement, that doesn't necessarily humanize your business. They just know, what the business name is, what they do, what products you sell, and maybe even a little bit of your brand image. But you can use social media to humanize your business by showing pictures of your employees, videos of your employees, yourself, really talking about your culture and how you approach doing business. And that can be a huge windfall when it comes to trying to convert, new prospects or new, people who are newly affiliated with your organization or your business, them understanding or seeing you as an individual and as a human being is so much easier to create a rapport than if they were seeing you strictly as a business person trying to sell them something or trying to get something out of them. The sophistication of social media has created this marketing environment that allows you to really target your audience. And so you can speak very succinctly and very pointedly at a group of prospects or people that you want to make contact with, and you don't have to just cast a very wide net anymore. You can speak to the ideal audience that you're really looking to speak to. It also helps with networking and collaboration. LinkedIn is a big one for this, but Facebook can also be used for it. You can connect to influencers. You can connect to colleagues or thought influencers and industry leaders across the world, basically, on social media. Whereas, if you're just relying on the dinner party that you're going to or the networking group that you go to every, once a month, it's not going to be as powerful. And so social media really gives you a big leverage to be able to make those contacts and be able to use those, those professional influencers or use those other people within your industry to, get information from, or, if you're looking for more work, you can use it in a B2B fashion as well. So the other thing is that content lasts forever, and we'll talk about this in terms of the drawbacks as well. But because content lasts forever, that basically means that if you put something out on social media, it continues to work for you, right? People will continue to search. They will continue to look for keywords and questions that you might answer using some of the information that you put out there on social media. And so it's kind of like, the ability to sell 24/7, 365. If you're putting out information like this, like I am right now, I'm hoping that, people don't just come across it tomorrow or the next day. I'm hoping that for the next 10 or 20 years, that people are going to search for the information, and some of the content that I've put out there is going to be the answer or some of the answers that they're looking for, and that will allow them to come to my front door. So what are some of the negatives? So in the workplace, it can create a distraction, which basically takes away productive time from your employees. So that's obviously the first thing that people think about in terms of their employee base and whether or not to allow them access to social media in the workplace. Bad news can spread very quickly on social media. Sometimes it spreads even faster than good news, and good kind of warm fuzzy stories that might happen or happen around your organization. And so for that reason, a lot of business owners and organizational leaders shy away from it, because you can end up with a big negative story that comes out and goes viral, or negative backlash where a lot of people are posting, irate or negative comments about your organization online. Employee comments and activities can reflect poorly on the organization as well. So if you give them freedom to use social media, they can always use it in their personal time, but still, if you don't have one of those policies that speaks to employee conduct and how they should conduct themselves, they might fly off the handle and take a grievance to social media, when really, they could just escalate it up the chain of command or chain of communication and deal with it that way. And then finally, again, content lasts forever, right? So it works for you on the good end, but it can also work against you on the bad end. That's part of the reason why you've had a big rise in a lot of these companies that help you. I think one of them is called Reputation Defender, right? There's a lot of companies out there that will try and scrub the internet to try and get the negative things out of there, or get the misinformation off or blocked from public eyes and public view. All right, so what are some best practices that you have to keep in mind, whether or not you're weighing actually using social media and allowing it in the workplace, or whether you already use it? What are some best practices in terms of how to protect yourself and risk manage that situation? Well, the first of which is develop a social media policy, and I would actually say develop two. The first of which should be more of your human resources social media policy, right? So that social media policy should really speak to how you're going to use social media checks and searches in your hiring and disciplinary and firing process. There are some real big pitfalls that you can run into in terms of using it that way. And so you really need to lay it out for your HR professionals how you intend to use it and what the limit is, right? It can't be completely unfettered. You can't just have free reign, dig something up on someone and use it to make a disciplinary decision or make a hiring or firing decision, because you can run into all kinds of regulatory and legal issues that way. The other policy would be more so the daily use for the rank and file. So all of your personnel that might be using social media on a daily basis, there should be a social media policy in place that speaks to how they're allowed to use it within the workplace. And also, like I said, one of those policies that really talks about how the individual should conduct themselves on social media so as to not really, bring or attract negative attention to your organization or your brand or your company. Consult your attorney and your risk manager when you're putting these plans together. The attorney is going to give you insight in terms of what kind of regulations and legal constraints there might be on the program or on the plan, and your risk manager is going to have some insights in terms of avoiding insurance claims or avoiding other types of risks. A big one here is cyber liability risks and cyber attacks. So social media is a form of internet communication, and so the same things that apply in the cyber risk management module can be applied in your social media policy. And so you can really take that opportunity to double down on informing employees of what is safe, well risk managed behavior online when they're using social media. The other thing I would say is use a template when you're forming these plans and these programs. Use the template, but then customize it towards your specific industry and your specific organization, right? So every single organizational leader is going to have a different level of comfort, different comfort level with social media. And so if you want to take a very strict stance, okay, be consistent with it, and write that down in your policy and make sure to take that template in that direction. If you're going to be a little bit more liberal with it, know that you have to use a little bit more open language, and you have to tailor your policy more so in that direction. All right. So never make snap decisions when it comes to an employee's activity online. And so they might do something that really kind of rubs you the wrong way, catches you by surprise, you think is very, not becoming an employee that you want to have continued employment at your organization. However, do not take action immediately without thinking it over, without consulting an attorney or a risk manager, because if you do, you could end up with a much bigger issue, okay? At the end of the day, it might come down to a value discussion about, whether or not being sued by an employee that you're firing is actually worth it, because you need to save face based off of something that they did online. But don't just summarily make that decision without going through that thought process, because you could end up thinking that you're saving yourself face and saving yourself money from that standpoint, or saving yourself brand image, and then it could end up costing you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in a wrongful termination or a discrimination or harassment lawsuit on the back end of that. All right, monitor employees' social media activity. I think this kind of goes without saying, but if you're going to afford them use of social media, specifically with respect to conducting business, make sure to have some kind of monitoring in place. And again, employ your attorney and your risk manager to make sure that you're not overstepping any privacy laws on that. Maintain oversight with regard to specific social media campaigns. And so if you have specific campaigns that you're going to allow employees to use social media for, but you're not going to give them completely open use of it, make sure that they're staying in their lane and that they're using it strictly for that campaign and that they're using it in the the intended way for that campaign, as opposed to going off half-cocked, so to speak, and kind of using things in a way that social media wasn't intended. All right, so the last 2 points here are things that I've mentioned before, but I'm gonna double back on them because they're very, very important. Always weigh the cost-benefit analysis. Always weigh the cost benefits when making a decision based off of social media. Not just in terms of whether you should allow social media or actively use social media for your organization, but when it comes to those disciplinary or HR type situations that could end up resulting in some other follow-through claim or lawsuit, you really have to take a calculated approach to it. And the last thing is be consistent. Okay, so part of those, even if you don't make a snap decision and you go through a really calculated approach, if you go through the calculated approach in one instance and you don't in another, the instance where you don't go through the calculated approach is going to be the one that ends up biting you, because you've unfairly or discriminatorily applied certain processes. And if you don't give someone the same level of treatment, or you don't enforce those policies and procedures the same way across the board, you're going to end up with an issue on your hands. So make sure to steer clear of that. So that's all I have on social media in the workplace. Again, seek out that podcast. It's the Call Your Broker podcast, episode number 5 on social media. And there's also some links in the text article here for this blog that go to the actual blog post that inspired the Call Your Broker podcast episode. Is listed there, so you can go see that as authored by Kelly Adler. And thank you very much, as I always say, but I'll keep saying it. Please, if you like the content, like it, subscribe, share it, and please post comments and questions. We would love to hear from you and interact with you. So that's it on social media. See you on day 25.